everyone. My name is Ryanne Fisher, and this is the Born to be a Scout podcast. This podcast explores how impactful the scouting movement is on our future lives and on all of those around us. Join me as we talk to some amazing leaders on how scouting has led them to their successes in life. The gist of this podcast is a sit down with great leaders that have been impacted by the scouting movement and how they have learned to lead through their love of scouting, even beyond fun campouts. A shout out goes to Alex Boyer for giving me permission to use the song Born to be a Scout in my podcast and marketing. You can add to his over 1 billion views on his YouTube channel or find out more about his great service work at alexboyer.com. That's ALEXBOYE.com. Now join us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts as we have great conversations with people who are just born to be a scout. Today's guest is Mark Chilutti. After scouting as a youth in Philadelphia, Mr. Chilutti now serves as the Cradle of Liberty Council president. Whether he is setting up campsites or setting up champion wheelchair tennis serves, it seems like there is nothing Mr. Chilutti can't do. Join us as we talk about this scout turned jeweler turned hospital fundraising advocate and his countless twists and turns that led him to where he is today. With years of continuous service to scouting and over $50 million raised for his community hospital, there is no doubt that this 2024 Silver Buffalo Award recipient was born to be a scout. Mr. Mark Chilutti, welcome to Born to be a Scout.
Thanks, Ryanne, and please call me Mark.
Thank you for joining us here today. I heard you have lots of interesting stories to tell us about your life. Are you prepared?
I am. My life has been a whirlwind, and I think we're going to spend some time going through all the twists and turns during the time we have allotted.
This is definitely one of the podcasts that I am going to go back and listen to because your stories are definitely ones I was not expecting.
I hear that lots when I start to tell people a piece of it, or people that have known me for a while every so often be like, wait a minute, I didn't know that part of it. So yeah, let's have some fun with it.
I wanted to start off with a theme that we had during our conversation before of how important public speaking was to scouting and how that grew. Like, do you want to talk about public speaking's importance to you as a scout and how it bled into your life?
Sure. When we're young and, advancing in rank, nobody really expects that the things they're learning are going to help later in life, even though that's what our leaders tell us, right, all the time. And say, you'll be glad later that you did this. And public speaking was always one of my favorite things at a young age, whether it was standing in front of a crowd at a troop meeting or helping out at a council event, or was big in doing OA ceremonies, had a DJ business, and just loved doing speaking. And now fast forward to decades later in my professional career, so much of what I do is spending my time in front of crowds, whether it's making pitches to raise money or motivational speaking or just kind of pulling a crowd together and sharing some thoughts. It's a big part of my life, and I owe so much of that to what I learned as a youth in scouting.
I definitely agree. Public speaking has prepared me for a lot of situations, including this one. And with public speaking, I've learned that sometimes we need to tell stories just a little differently. And so usually I kind of just ask what you're doing in your life right now and how scouting got you there. But I think it would be easier if we took this episode and kind of use it to walk us through your life, kind of in order, because I think that tells the story of your life a little bit better.
Sure.
So if you're prepared, we're going to start back to when you were a wee little scout. How was it as a scout, as you were scouting in Philadelphia, in Philadelphia Council at the time? What did scouting look like for you as a youth?
Yeah, so I had a great scoutmaster who I really appreciate, more as life goes on, because when it came time for things like OA events, chapter meetings, OA weekends, it never was like, if you want to go, here's the form to sign up. It was, we're meeting at the church Thursday at 6:30 to go to the chapter meeting. I'll see you there. And I'm so grateful that he, loved the OA and got me involved in that at such an early age. And, I kind of became an Eagle Scout early on. I was 5 weeks after my 14th birthday. And a lot of people would think, that's too young. But really, for me, it was, let's get that done so we can move on to being more involved in the OA. As a youth, that included serving as lodge chief, serving on camp staff. Had the opportunity to be inducted into the Order of the Arrow at Treasure Island, the birthplace. So lots of cool things. And then shortly after my term as lodge chief, I was already section vice chief and then became section chief in the OA, and just tried to really soak up every opportunity that I could as a youth, including, while I was a section chief, traveling to the National OA planning meeting, being elected as a section or a conference vice chief to plan the 1988 National Order of the Arrow Conference. So much cool stuff.
It looks like you have lots of really cool OA memorabilia behind you too, so I can tell you're definitely committed. And I heard that you were once a disc jockey too. So how did that end up connecting to this Order of the Arrow passion of yours?
Yeah, so another one where you wouldn't expect the worlds to collide, right? But I had my own DJ business when I was 16 to 21 and loved it because, it was a chance to kind of get crowds excited and have a lot of fun. Plus, in all honesty, I made good money as a kid, which was really great. Because when you work at summer camp, you don't really work at camp for the money. So having that money, the rest of the year was great. And then fast forward to 1988, they wanted to have a radio station at the National Order of the Arrow Conference for the first time. My friend Angelo Capelli, who was the national vice chief, had this crazy idea. And then they found out that I was a DJ and had my own business. And so fast forward, we had the first radio station at the National Order of the Arrow Conference. Ben Love was the chief scout executive at the time. He was there visiting NOAC and thought, wow, this would be great to have a radio station at the Jamboree. So we did that in 1989. And, it was kind of cool every time I would go back to NOAC or go to a Jamboree afterwards and see those programs happening. It was just pretty awesome to know that you played a part in the first one.
So businessman, even as a teenager, I definitely love it. And so now we're moving towards adulthood. How were the first couple of years as being a teenager, moving into adulthood? What did college life look like for you?
Yeah, so went to college at Temple University in Philadelphia, pledged a fraternity, and that was really when I think my first real life example of the things that we learned as a youth in scouting would benefit us later in life, because it was time to plan an event and talk about, raising money and having a budget and a plan. And people didn't know how to even start, but those were things doing as a young scout, and certainly as lodge chief, balancing a budget of $10,000 and 1,000 members in the lodge, so standing up in front of a group of 15, 20 guys, that was pretty easy. But I also realized that, some of the same people who had made fun of me throughout my life for being involved in scouting, I can't go here on the weekend because I'm going to camp, right? And now they're realizing wow, maybe it wasn't so bad to be a scout, since they realized that's when I learned all those things. So it's kind of cool.
Scouting has definitely taught us a lot of things. So even though we're giving up weekends, I think we're growing more than some of our peers, which definitely showed in your life. Now, as you've moved on to a teenager, what big events were happening then? How was your life changing?
Yeah, so my sophomore year in college was coming home one night from hanging out with some of my fraternity brothers, and I had some car troubles. So kind of pulled over to the side of the road on 95 to see what was going on, and got out of the car, went around to the front. There were two guys that were volunteer firemen. They stopped and put some flashing lights and flares out there to try and distract traffic. And as we were looking to see what was going on with the car, all of a sudden out of nowhere came a guy speeding down the road, turned out to be a drunk driver, hit me. My body flew up on the hood of his car. My head went through the windshield. I was on his car while it hit pickup truck and totaled it, hit my car and totaled it, and then smashed into the wall. When he smashed into the wall, I rolled forward, got wedged between his car and the wall, and next thing you know, the gas line burst. two truckers coming down the road saw what was going on, stopped their rigs, got out, came over, lifted the car up while somebody else pulled me out. They radioed ahead, and a rescue squad came and picked me up, took me to a place called Hahnemann Hospital, where I spent about 2 weeks. And then, as I sort of remember it, when I woke up, it was about 16 days later. I was at a place called Magee Rehabilitation Hospital. As my brain improved and my cognitive function improved, I quickly learned that I had 2 broken bones in my hand, 2 broken bones in my leg, 7 burns on my body, 100 stitches in my face, and traumatic brain injury. A lot to swallow as a young kid. I had just returned, 2 weeks ago from the OA National Planning Meeting and being elected to this cool position to help plan the National Order of the Arrow Conference. And now here I was sitting in a rehabilitation hospital having a lot of work ahead of me.
So how did you swallow all of this? How did you take a moment to take in everything that's happened and move forward?
Yeah, I mean, I reflect back to so much of what I did on the Trail to Eagle, right? We had to set goals. We had to work hard for them. We had to go outside of our comfort zone. And sometimes we also had to take leadership cues from others and be the follower instead of the leader. So I was really dependent upon my therapist, physical and occupational therapist, speech therapist, to really help me through this. Thankfully, the brain healed quickly. Then it was just a matter of taking care of the physical injuries. And as I would tell people, later on, 51 days later, after I went to the doctor's office, my casts were cut off my leg and my arm, and I walked out of the doctor's office with a totally, totally different, thought process about life. Anything, little things that went wrong, you realize, what? No big deal. Other kind of hiccups or bumps on the road, if I can deal with that, I can deal with this, no problem. Piece of cake.
So moving forward from college, from this injury and situation, what did your life then look like? What were you doing next?
Yeah, so it was time to figure out what I was going to do next, like what would be my career. And always loved jewelry, had an interest in that, so decided that I was going to pursue a job in jewelry. I started at a store called Price Jewelers that had opened in a big outlet mall when these were first opening up. I started on a Sunday. It was a pretty new store, and all of us were learning. By Thursday of that week, the guy who was the manager needed help and needed someone to plan the work schedules and figure all that kind of management things out. I didn't know much about jewelry, but I knew how to plan work schedules. I knew how to lead people, and suddenly, I became the supervisor. And then 3 weeks later, as he began to see more of my leadership skills, I became the assistant manager. And I think it was interesting because he figured, and this made sense because I've kind of done the same thing later in life, that, there are things he could teach me about the jewelry business, but it's kind of hard to teach adults how to be leaders, right? It's a lot different than learning it when we're younger, and it's kind of ingrained in our DNA. So that was a really cool start. I went, they supported me, and I went to school at the Gemological Institute of America, kind of doing home study. And this was before virtual study, of course. So it was interesting. They would send you a couple lessons and actually send you some diamonds and gemstones in the mail that you would kind of grade and work with. And then you would send back and, be at a certificate in diamonds and diamond grading and fine jewelry management. But I also, at the same time, would tell the owner of this store, you keep passing over me for being manager. You're investing all this money, but unfortunately, if you don't give me an opportunity to lead the store, then somebody else is going to benefit from it. So sure enough, a couple years later, it was time to really move on, and found a great store named Block Jewelers, and was a father-son business. The son was at the store I was at, became a really great lifelong friend. And he was really willing to let me learn as much as I wanted, do as much as I wanted. And all of that training, really kind of set me up for later in life. And eventually I realized that I was making other people, a lot of money and not myself. So I thought maybe I can do this on my own, and decided it was time to open up my own jewelry store. So found a small little corner store in the neighborhood I grew up in. I wasn't like one of these third generation jeweler guys. My dad was a roofer, in fact, so I wasn't a rich kid either, and just worked hard and saved up some money, had a lot of people believe in me. And, in April of 94, opened the store, and it was really cool. I had three brothers, two sisters. So, a lot of people knew the family name from scouting or sports or school. So jewelry is the kind of thing you need to trust the person, and that whole trustworthy, life that I was living didn't hurt either. So it was very cool and very exciting to see a dream like that come to life.
So that's business number 2 already in our conversation. I think we just started. You very much seem to be able to put together the skills that you've learned as a youth in order to build yourself, grow yourself into who you want to be. Now, after you've built this new store, you're proud, you're growing, you've showcased your leadership skills. How does history continue? Where does your life turn from there?
Yeah. So I was fortunate that I lived at home with my parents. Um, Only really saw them like bedtime because I was working long hours and long days. And sometimes on Sunday we'd be able to eat together because the store was closed on Sunday. But that enabled me to kind of sink every extra dollar after the bills were paid back into the business. So first goal was really growing the inventory, and was able to do that. And by the first anniversary, I was able to start taking a paycheck, which anybody who started their own business knows that's like a big accomplishment, and then by the next Christmas, we'd almost doubled the size of the store, had a repair shop in the back. So things were really coming along. And I sort of, thought that's the place where I would spend the rest of my life and my career. And, I tell people that what came next is one of those things, you could never really be prepared for. Although you can take your best precautions. And, I used to park my car around the corner from the store every morning, and walk around that corner and realize, how lucky I was, and think I finally found what I want to do in life, and be a fixture in the community and be in business for a long time. But never could I have imagined that when I walked around the corner to my store on December 5th, 1996, so a little over 27 years ago, that will be the last day that I would ever walk again. So kind of crazy when you think about that, right? And nobody could ever expect what would happen that day to me. And, it was December 5th, so holiday season. Most people are not disappointed if they would get jewelry for a gift for the holidays. So store was pretty busy, and it was finally around 11:30 in the morning when I had the first break, and was able to sit down and actually finish my breakfast. And two guys came walking into the store. I greeted them just like I would everybody else. First guy came in, "Hey, how you doing?" Second guy came in, boom, pulled a gun, pointed it right at me. Instantly threw my hands up in the air, because I realized, everything in that store could be replaced except for my life, and said, "Take whatever you want. Just please don't hurt me."
And so what did end up happening from there?
Yeah. So, while I said you can never really be prepared for something like this to happen, you can take the best precautions. So I think, I was prepared in that I was ahead of the curve and able to have video surveillance in there. I also had lots of panic buttons to notify the alarm company. So I was able to safely pull a panic button. And meanwhile, the guy with the gun took me to the back of the store where the safe was, and he's emptying that out, taking some jewelry out of there, some diamonds out of there, some cash out of there. Meanwhile, I'm on the ground, the gun is pointed at me. He's taken the jewelry that I was wearing. I had a watch and a couple rings and a bracelet. And all this time, he's yelling orders out to the guy who came into the store. Now, of course, this guy knew they were coming in to rob me. But it almost was surreal what would happen next, because he's yelling to this guy, telling him to tape me up and tie me up and break the cases and take the jewelry. And oddly enough, every time he would do that, the guy would say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. And I think the guy got frustrated, the guy with the gun, and all of a sudden he just turned around and shot me. That bullet went in my chest, in and out of my lungs, and severed my spinal cord, leaving me paralyzed from the chest down.
So now your life has changed completely. And we're talking about the Scout motto being of be prepared. How did that change? You said in life you're taught to be prepared, but now you can never be prepared for everything. How did you move forward?
Yeah, so I laid there on the ground while I heard the guy go out and break a case or two and take some jewelry. I could hear the door close. Tried to get up, and I knew something was really wrong with my body because I couldn't. I was able to pull myself around a door frame into another room, pulled a panic button for the second time just to make sure it happened. Police arrived, quickly made a decision. They knew that I was losing a lot of blood. I stayed conscious the whole time. Rather than wait for a rescue squad to get there, they carefully loaded me in the back of a police car, took me to the nearest hospital, and I was able to give them a description of what happened, was able to tell them where the video tapes could be found. And I kind of was wide awake until I got to that hospital. I remember the rescue squad arriving. I remember personnel rushing out and, again, telling them, giving them descriptions. I even remember one of the craziest things, to tell them that I wore contact lenses, because when I was hit by the drunk driver, they didn't know that. And one of the contacts went in the back of my eye. And so it was just, odd those things come to mind. And then they jammed a chest tube in me, and next thing I knew, I woke up, it was around 8:30 at night. I was in Thomas Jefferson University Hospital in Center City with family and friends around me. The good news was I was alive. The bad news was, and nobody really needed to tell me, because I sort of figured this out, that I was paralyzed from the chest down and likely would not walk again. So spent a couple weeks in acute care hospital. Then it was time to go to rehab again. So we kind of already knew a hospital that did a great job at that, because I was there 8 years before that. So here I am back at the same hospital, totally different injury, and spent the next 6 weeks there trying to figure out how I was going to live the rest of my life successfully, even if I had to do it sitting down. I was 28 at the time, and people would ask all the time, like, I don't know how you could be so positive. And my response always was like, well, what are my options? It's not like I could rewind the clock. There's no rewind button in life, as we know. And, I don't like to hang with miserable people. So I certainly wasn't going to be one. And I found that if I could share with my friends and family and everybody else that, what, I'm okay, I'm going to make it through this, then it made them feel more comfortable, and also help them see that I'm the same guy as I was before. I'm just now sitting down for a living.
And with recovery, what was one of the biggest lessons that you learned that you were connecting to? And I guess I'm assuming you'd lots of time to sit and reflect and figure out where and what you're going to do with your life. What were you thinking during this time?
Honestly, I had no idea what was going to come next in life. I mean, my goals before all this happened were to, maybe expand the store more and to be making $100,000 a year by my 30th birthday. Like, that was what was in my head. And now, like, while I'm laying in the bed in the rehab hospital, my goals were to, like, tie my shoes. That's how vastly your life changes. And then I figured out how to do that. So I was like, okay, now it's on to the next one. So then I was like, I want to be able to, master wheelchair skills. I would already ask questions like, am I going to be able to do this? Am I going to be able to travel? Am I going to always need somebody to help me? Am I going to be able to drive by myself? And the answers to all of those things were yes. You might have to do them a little differently than you did before, but you can still do them. And I think that was enough to kind of feed the fire inside of me to just keep going and figure all this out. So about 6 weeks later, was able to return home. I lived in the basement at my house while it was renovated. I had moved out of my parents' house already. I had bought my own house just like 9 months before this happened. Thankfully, was able to go back to that house because I always think it would have been terrible to have to like try to sell a house and find a new house. And I continued with outpatient therapy for probably the next 10 or 11 months so I could build up strength and in my upper body and learn wheelchair skills. And that September of that first year, the community really was awesome and had a big fundraiser and raised enough money to buy a car equipped with hand controls so I could, start the drive and then truly try to figure out what was next. But I honestly didn't know at that point because for my whole adult working career was in the jewelry industry.
But you obviously did decide what was going to be next after a while of recovering. So what was next? What was the really cool adventure that you put yourself out there to attempt to do?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting too because I think the first one maybe didn't go as well as hoped, but little did I know that, losing sometimes is actually winning. I was starting to do a lot of speaking, right? I'd already done that in scouting. So it was as a volunteer for my hospital. I would speak about gun violence or gun safety issues. And then sometimes, city council was going to be holding a hearing about something. Would you come and speak to them? Or speaking in the mayor's office. Next thing I know, I'm in the state capitol in Harrisburg for a gun safety rally. And people were asking like, well, what can we do to change things? And they're like, well, maybe write to your legislator. And I raised my hand and said, well, what do you do if you write to your legislator about this and he doesn't write back or you never hear from him? And I asked who my legislator was at that time, happened to be the majority leader. And there are a lot of people in the room. And next thing you know, this meeting is over and I've got probably 6 people around me saying, did you ever think about running for office? I'm like, no, I ran for, it was a lot different running for lodge chief or running for section chief. Those were much easier things, and running for section chief, I need to get 46 votes. That's a lot different than being elected to the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, but it certainly intrigued me. So after this event was over in Harrisburg, then we talked a little more and one thing leads to another. And next thing you know, I'm a candidate for the House of Representatives against a 22-year incumbent who also happens to be the majority leader and was one of the most powerful men in the state. So we have about maybe 16 months to work on the campaign trail. Lots of people saying, how crazy I was. You're never going to beat this guy. But I kind of, was a student of the numbers and dissected them and knew that in presidential years, this guy was much more vulnerable. I also had a lot of things that could kind of neutralize him in this legislative district in that one, the area I grew up in was at the one far end of the legislative district. My jewelry store was sort of in the middle of the district and he and I lived about 3 blocks away from each other. So the neighborhood we lived in was a little different. So spent those times raising money, had a campaign manager to work with me, lots of volunteers who believed in me. Again, going back to scouting, you think, right, we lead volunteers even as a youth. So that was kind of cool. And I think, the part that really was interesting was even if I had one, it's like I had all these people really working so hard day in and nights and weekends to help me get elected. And really all they were going to get out of it was the satisfaction of helping me and hoping that I was going to do a better job. So fast forward to election day and, it's crazy. And my opponent, thought that he had won before election day even got there. And I had some pretty good indications that we were going to do okay. So spent that day visiting all the polling places that we could, shaking hands and thanking people for coming out, and was back at my house and had a whole, election headquarters set out at a Knights of Columbus hall. And the interesting thing was, as the numbers started to come in, it got real. And here we are, the polls close at 8 o'clock and it's like 9:30, quarter to 10. There's people already at the election headquarters, hoping that they're going to have a party. And we're 50 votes apart. And I think there were two ways to look at it. 50 votes apart, he was ahead. But the other way was that nobody thought I had a chance at all. And, but eventually, my campaign manager and I think maybe my brother Keith was there as well. We decided we got to go see the people. And we quickly realized that election results weren't going to be done that night. So went down and talked to a bunch of people, thanked them all. And, people still, you're going to win. And next, like 2.5 weeks, there was a recount done and pick up a couple votes here, a couple votes there. And eventually, everything was done and I lost by 92 votes and had to call an end to that. And, fascinating kind of piece in my life, an interesting footnote that, this sent shockwaves around the entire Capitol because all of these people who really wanted me to win because they didn't like my opponent. He was a very, kind of tough guy and they were afraid of him and all these people that realized like, man, if we just would have believed in this guy and put a little bit of effort into helping him, he could have actually, won the election and beat this guy. So I lost. But you know what? As I look back on what came next, there's no doubt that I won and the people that I've had the opportunity to help have truly won as a result of me losing the election.
And when you win with or lose by short margins, it often hurts more than losing by larger margins. How did it feel that it was only 92 votes? What did you learn? How did you grow from that?
Yeah, I think it was disappointing, especially because, there were only one or two parts of the district that we didn't campaign really hard in. And that was because this one guy in particular was like, I got you. Don't worry about it. You don't need to spend your time here. And little did I know that like he had been bought off by my opponent. And you try to think about what's that little more that I could have done. And people like, oh, if we just put more money into your campaign. And I'm like, you know what? It wouldn't have been more money. Like if I had one more staffer, because I only had one full-time staffer, I had one more person to help. Or, if some of these other people really would just believe that I had a chance, then we could have done that. So yeah, it's tough, but you know what? There were 25,550 votes cast. So to be able to come that close against a guy who had been doing this for 22 years and was a household name, it still was pretty cool. And I still, 27 years later, there's not a year goes by that, once or twice during the year that I'll run into somebody and they're like, I voted for you, or weren't you the guy who ran against John Purcell for state representative? So yeah, kind of crazy. But I also knew at that point that, you know what, it's time that I have to figure out what's going to come next in life and really put my talents to work somewhere.
And it's fair to say that you're a strong fan of the citizen of the nation, of the community, of the world merit badges, then, aren't you?
Yeah, it's funny because ironically, when I became an Eagle Scout years before that, this guy was in office, and so I don't know that he was at my court of honor, but certainly had a state proclamation from him and a letter from him, and yeah, just kind of interesting. Of all the things I would tell people all the time, like, I never in a million years expected that I ever would run for office, but I also never in a million years expected that I would get shot and end up living my life with a spinal cord injury. So you just never know what's going to come. And again, when we go back to be prepared, like, you can have all these great plans and you can prepare yourself for them. But I think what I also learned about scouting is you have to be prepared that life is not always going to go the way that you want. You're going to hit some bumps on the road and some curveballs are going to come your way. And you have to be prepared and ready to navigate those next steps.
You said that you weren't sure originally what you were going to do next, but after this experience of running for office, it became clearer where your passions lie and what type of opportunities you could take advantage of. Where has that brought you to today? What are you doing now in order to support your community, as that seemed to obviously become a passion of yours?
Yeah, so a big part of running for office is raising money, and in addition to raising money for campaign, I also been raising money as a volunteer at Magee Rehab Hospital. I had helped with the golf tournament. They had an event called the Magee Derby that raised money for the wheelchair sports program. I had been a volunteer on that committee the first year. I was chairing it the next year. I think that's what we do in Scouts, right? You start and then you think, wow, you start to ask questions or make some suggestions, and next thing you know, you're in charge. I know you can relate to that with a lot of the experiences that you've had too. So fast forward, the campaign's done. Going into Magee to have lunch with my friend Ron Siggs, and I stopped in another person on the fundraising staff's office, and she told me she was leaving. She was going back to the hospital she had worked at before, and I thought, wow, this is kind of interesting. So went into Ron's office before lunch, and I said, hey, you know what? I heard that that Lisa is leaving. What would you think? I told you I might have an interest in working here. And he looked at me and said, what would you think? I was planning to talk to you about that. And, 23 and a half years later, I guess we both made a pretty good decision deciding that might work. So it's been a fascinating journey these last 23 plus years. My friend became my boss and is still my boss this many years later, and still my friend. Thankfully, I should add that, because not everybody can say that their boss is their good friend as well. And together, we've just been able to do some amazing things to help people like me recovering from traumatic injuries and illnesses to live a little better life.
So you're using a lot of your scout skills, your public speaking, your citizen in the community, and putting it out there to be an advocate for fundraising, for hospitals, for recovery. You're being a public speaker. How is all these experiences feeding back into scouting as well?
Yeah, it's what I was prepared to do, right? I just didn't maybe know it at the time. There's not a day goes by that I'm not grateful for all that I learned, as a youth, both in scouting and my work in the Order of the Arrow, because it just gave me opportunities that put me light years away, or light years ahead of everybody else my age, and also gave me that comfort zone. And the other thing, Ryan, to go back to public speaking, the thank goodness that I was already good at it and that I liked it, because the one thing that a lot of people you wouldn't think about, and I wouldn't expect you to, is that can't really speak behind a podium, right? Because a podium is going to come up to here. I sit in a wheelchair and I don't have that ability. So I may be able to have notes on my lap, but that the fact that I'm not glued to a podium has helped me to better prepare when it's time to be in front of crowds, and not really need notes. So again, I'm so grateful that scouting prepared me for that.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share about your story before we move on to our next section?
Um, yeah, I mean, I like to believe that I did a pretty good job at figuring out how to live a successful life in a wheelchair. So I am thrilled to have the opportunity to maybe play a small part in the lives of newly injured patients, to serve as a role model and a positive example, be a peer mentor for them. There's not a month goes by that a therapist doesn't ask if I can show somebody how I get into my car and how I take my chair apart. Um, I had the opportunity, my hospital sponsors, because of the money that we raise, sponsors wheelchair athletes to play, wheelchair basketball, tennis, rugby, racing. I had the opportunity to play wheelchair tennis for 8.5 years, competed all across the country, and, just an amazing opportunity. And it's great. That's something I played tennis before my injury, and to be able to get back to it, and just to be able to do the things that you enjoy in life, even if you have to figure out a way to do them a little differently.
I'm glad that you have all of that resilience because you've definitely made an impact on my life, and I know countless others out there in the community.
Thanks.
Our next section is the Lead Your Adventure section. I found it very important to myself to figure out a way to lead my own adventure because everybody's story is different. And you've really shown us in this podcast that you lived a very different story than even the one you thought you were leading when you were a teenager. How have you really learned to lead your own story, your own adventure in life? And what was like the key takeaway that really made that possible for you, even during all the hardship that you may have faced?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, this was a terrible thing that happened to me. But I figured out really quickly that I can control what comes next. There are a lot of people that help me, and people want me to be successful and want me to live a good life. But I have to be the one to decide I'm going to do that, right? I get to pick and choose, and I chose from day one that I'm gonna make this work. And whether it was, building up strength, learning how to get in and out of the wheelchair, learning how to all of those same goals that I set on the Trail to Eagle, I was then setting them. Like, in one of the things that helps you transfer from a bed into your wheelchair, or certainly a wheelchair into the car, with something called a transfer board, this piece of wood. And, I wasn't long. I'm like, all right, by Valentine's Day, I want to ditch the transfer board. I want to be done with that. Um, and and deciding that I have a full life ahead of me, and I was 28 at that time, and I want to experience all that I can. So when you talk about leading your own adventure, um, you can do the best planning. You're not always going to end up where you think you are, but you know what? If that adventure takes a twist or a turn, go with it. Go for it and decide you're going to figure it out, because you know what? Reverse doesn't always work in life either. There's no rewind button, as I said. You can't go backwards, so go forward. And if you hit a bump in a road, you know what? Again, stop, take the time to think about it, and realize that, again, life's going to go on. There's a lot more. If I had given up at 28, I couldn't imagine um, everything that I've been able to do since then has just been awesome. Whether, those adventures have included traveling, taking cruises, whether it's traveling actually for tennis, traveling for scouting, traveling for work. Some of my best scouting trips, had the opportunity to go to Transatlantic Council's Normandy Jamboree in 2014. Was the 70th anniversary of D-Day, and it was just amazing to be on those hallowed beaches where history, not always great history, happened, but to be a part of that. And the other thing I think too is that, especially when with the youth that I worked with in scouting as lodge advisor and in my OA roles, it's been nice to know that they don't think about Mark's in a wheelchair. This is just Mark. And sometimes I have to remind them, because the adventure they have planned, especially around camp, is like, we're going to go here, we're going to go there, we're going to do this. And I'm like, okay, time out, guys. I want to do that, but there's a lot of rocks and hills. So not that we can't do it. Let's just take the time and figure it out. So, life truly is an adventure. And, you control your destiny. You can pick up and move forward and try new things. And if I can do that, if I was not afraid to try new things after my life had changed so significantly, you gotta live life. You have to enjoy it. So
I can't agree with you more. I think the best thing that we all can do is take on the opportunities that life gives us, especially some of those scouting opportunities. For any scout out there that's thinking about taking on a new scout trip, definitely try to say yes if you can, because there are some really cool opportunities that you might never get again.
yeah, and I think the other piece is that, what, my life changed significantly when I was 28, and I was not the kind of person to put things off before then, and I'm glad that I didn't. Um, Nobody is promised tomorrow, so you wake up every day, and we really have to take advantage of what life gives us another day. We've got to appreciate that and take advantage of it. I tell people all the time, I have a lot of great qualities, but being sympathetic is not really good quality for me, because I don't want to hear about somebody else's complaints, because I feel like if I can get up and I can live my life dealing with the challenges that have been thrown my way, you know what? Figure it out. Like, we can do this, you can do this. And I hope that's always one of the goals, that every time I talk to people is, you know what? Hear my story. Think about it. You wake up, think you're having a bad day. You know what? Think about me, and your day should be nothing. If I can figure this out, so can you.
Well, I definitely heard your story, and I'm very glad that you're here to share it. I'm now going to move us into some quick fire questions so we can
Sure.
hear a little bit more about you in just a quick amount of time. So, first question is, what's your favorite merit badge?
You probably wouldn't be surprised if I said public speaking, right?
Not allowed to use that one. You got to pick another one. I think we know that public speaking is obviously the favorite. What's the second favorite?
Well, you know what? If you say favorite merit badge, I would say, if we say favorite time and that I enjoyed earning, I'd say emergency preparedness merit badge. Got to do it with one of my great friends, and at summer camp in 1982, or 1981 or 82, and it's a vivid memory, and I think scouting fills us with them. So we'll go with emergency preparedness.
Love it. What was the favorite position that you've ever served in scouting?
Regional Order of the Arrow chairman. I had the opportunity to have 3 region chiefs, actually 4 region chiefs. They're elected by section chiefs, and just all great young men. And to be able to truly, firsthand, the Order of the Arrow, when we say a youth-led organization, to be able to watch them grow and lead, and to be there to just kind of sit in the background, was really an awesome ride.
What does it mean to you to be a scout?
It means, I think, being grateful for everything that the scouting organization has provided to me and continues to provide to me on a daily basis. So being a scout is the ultimately the best part of my life, the most consistent part of my life, and something I'll eternally be grateful for.
What does it mean to you to be a leader?
It means you've got to lead by example, and people, you also know a leader is always on the job. So there's no time off as a leader. People are watching you and listening to you and learning from you. So leaders don't get a day off, and I take that challenge on.
You said you're an Eagle Scout. What was your project, and what was the biggest takeaway you had from your trail to Eagle?
Yeah. So my Eagle project was restoring the kiddie play area at my local playground, and it really needed it badly. So I was glad that we were able to do it. In hindsight, I think the only disappointment I have is that I wish I might have picked something that had a more lasting legacy, that I could go back 10, 20, 30, 40 years later and show people that, hey, I did that. But, at the time, that's what was needed. My biggest takeaway from the Trail to Eagle was that even though I became an Eagle Scout at the young age of 14, a lot of people think that's way too young to become an Eagle Scout. And people, that earn it that young leave the program, and they don't give back to others on the trail behind them like they're supposed to. And I'm living proof, that you can become a young Eagle Scout, give back, and keep blazing new trails as you move forward.
What advice do you have for young people entering in the real world, young scouts maybe trying to take on their first job, or just be an adult for the first time?
Yeah, so I think there's a few. If you're an Eagle Scout, you are crazy if you do not include that on your resume. That will be one of the biggest door openers that you will have throughout your lifetime, and you need to really take advantage of it. The other advice is that take advantage of opportunities, use the scouting network to help you meet people in the field that you want to be a part in, or quite honestly, if you don't know what you do or what you want to do in life, then look to that scouting network to kind of talk to different people, and you'll be amazed that people will just be thrilled to help you because you're a scout.
To wrap us up, can you tell us how you've used the Be Prepared slogan to really lead your life, even with all of the changes that might be happening?
Yeah, I think don't think of those two words simply for what they are, because be prepared, as I've shared throughout the conversation we've had, that I never could have been prepared for everything that was going to happen to me. But what I realized as those crazy things happen was that everything that I learned in scouting prepared me for how to deal with them. And I think that's what really, really connected the dots for me. And again, everything from setting goals and moving ahead, challenging myself, thinking outside of my comfort zone, or having to learn new things. That was what life was all about. So, prepared to move me forward and prepared me for even, whatever comes next along the trail. Because 55, I've got a lot of adventure ahead of me, and I'm prepared for, whatever's left in life for me to experience and enjoy each day that I have.
Well, thank you for joining us on the Born to Be a Scout podcast. I think your story was absolutely amazing, full of lots of twists and turns, and I think there's still so much of your story that we weren't even able to share. So I definitely, if you're out there and you're interested, you should definitely follow Mark and his story, as he has lots of great, impactful stories to tell and inspirational statements to make.
Thanks so much for having me. This has been fun, and I really appreciate all that you're doing too. It's been great to watch you on your scouting trail, and I've known your pop-up for a long time, and I know you make him proud. He's your biggest number one fan, but you already know that.
For sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
This has been the Born to Be a Scout podcast. I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. To catch us on all of our future episodes and posts, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Born to Be a Scout Podcast, or look out for future episodes on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. If you're a scout who'd like to take leadership in scouting, or even in your future business career to the next level, be sure to check out MLT Leadership Academy this summer and Leadership Heights at the 2026 National Scout Jamboree. In the meantime, be sure to lead your own adventure. 'Cause baby, I was born to be a scout.